There are an increasing number of leopard deaths caused by vehicular impact happening inside Yala National Park.
We know this is the fourth leopard, but we don't know if there were 5 or 6 or 7 others.
So accidents will happen, but are they really accidents?
Just because they didn't follow the rules.
Ex-BBC journalist called Yala the worst wildlife experience in the world.
We will turn our national parks into concentration camps.
So I think immediate measures are required to tackle this issue.
It would be a very sad day for the Prime Minister of this country to have to stand up in Parliament and say, the last leopard in Yala died yesterday.
You have this great resource there and nobody knows how to manage it.
Nothing short of the President, Prime Minister getting involved.
Since politicians created the problem in the first place, it's also, ironically, politicians who can solve this problem.
To understand why not 1 but 4 leopard have been killed by hit-and-run vehicle inside a national park, we must first understand Yala, its potential and its current crisis. It's not just leopard under threat. Starving elephants, animal poaching and overzealous tourism promoters have all caused the eco-disaster that is currently affecting Yala National Park. What can be done? This question and more led our editorial team to Yala, where we learned and saw for ourselves that the rules and regulations governing wilderness areas are a joke at best. Over the years, LT Magazine has consulted conservationist Rukshan Jayawardena many times on Sri Lanka's natural heritage and biodiversity. Today, Rukshan joins us on location to share with us his views on the present crisis and what must be done if we are truly to rescue Yala.
Yala to me is a special place. It's a wilderness area that is unlike any other wilderness area in Sri Lanka. And I have been coming here since I was a small child, actually a 6-year-old, when I made my first visit with my family. And then I've been coming here ever since. Yala is a unique mosaic of habitats and landform. It also has large areas of scrubland, large glades or open areas, grasslands, as well as rocky outcrops or rock knobs that stick out above the rest of the landscape. It also has estuarine habitats as well as 2 rivers that run through it.
The primary piece of legislation that governs the regulation of wildlife is the Fauna and Flora Ordinance. I think you know that the law was passed many years ago, I think around the 1930s, and it had been thereafter subject to amendments to try to bring it in line with modern requirements.
The national park primarily it exists for protecting or conserving the wildlife that live within it, as well as it acts as a recreation area for all the citizens of the country. But as a recreation area, it still is guided by the Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance, which restricts many types of activity and allows some types of activity only. And mainly viewing of wildlife, studying, observing the fauna and flora is the main objective of setting aside this land for the people.
The law is mainly focused on protecting national parks. You're looking at the different types. I won't go into technicality. You're looking at sanctuaries, you're looking at reserves, and you're looking at parks. I think there is provision made for every one of them.
Now you see how undulating this countryside is. And it's a slope goes down those rocks, little valleys. If you look at the way those trees are growing, there's a little ravines, and even this road, you see it's sloping. The elephant was walking towards us. We had just set off on our journey. That's supposed to be a Sri Lankan auspicious sign.
Yala has always been a special place for me. I first visited in the late 90s and travelled with friends from Colombo who were following leopards there. But the park previously had always been known as an elephant park. If you wanted to see leopards, you went to Wilpattu. but because of the conflict, it was no longer accessible.
Today, you don't see many elephants in Yala. If you think back 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, we saw many, many more elephants in Yala. In 2001, the elephants were chased in, and an electric fence was put up. In 2004, 2 people got killed here by elephants. Emotions ran very high. There were other nefarious people who got involved in that, like poachers. And as a result of that, on the day of the second person's funeral, a mob got together and went and attacked the Wildlife Department office. The department people shot at them in self-defense, and 1 person got killed. So after that, there was like a war between the village and the department. And finally, it was resolved by the department agreeing to again chase the elephants into the park and closing the fence. So if this continues, already there are a couple of generations missing in the herds that are still there. And once the big animals die, that population will completely collapse.
Yala was a place when I came back from Oz in '94, a place where I could go look for leopards. That was my passion. And photograph, study, hopefully, and view them. When we first started, the proximity a leopard would let us approach was, maybe 300-400 yards. But eventually, by kind of patiently observing at a distance, letting leopards get comfortable, sometimes letting leopards dictate how close they want to come to us. Slowly, this process of habituation turned Yala into a leopard park. There was a book done called For the Leopard, and with the launch of that book, there was also a film called The Leopard Hunter. That started specialized leopard tourism by certain people in the tourist trade. But then these people started marketing in BBC Wildlife magazine, etc., which was great. But we didn't have the proper guides, no English-speaking guides, and Rukshan and myself and others often came across kind of bemused, puzzled tourists who didn't know what was happening, but who were wildlife enthusiasts.
On subsequent revisits to the park, I realized that the tourism numbers were getting bigger and bigger. And we often discussed, how can this be limited?
So in the recent years, I've seen the cycle changing, unfortunately, where leopards are becoming skittish. Observing natural behavior is becoming harder, and I really relate this back to bad behavior and overcrowding of the park.
වාහන තමන්ට කැටි ගත්තොත් මොන වගේ ප්‍රතිශතයක්ද වේගයෙන් යන්නේ නිරන්තරයෙන්ම වේගයෙන් යන්නේ. I don't have an insight on what the corporates are doing like Toby has, because he is in tourism. I see the results on the ground as a person who is intimately involved with this park.
We have spoken, and I have spoken to the Department of Wildlife Conservation, the Tourism Ministry, people in the travel trade, conservationists, and everyone has agreed something has to be done. But nothing has been done.
What's happening here now is there is a general administrative breakdown in the Department of Wildlife, which primarily affects the field staff and the field areas, and the national park and sanctuaries and other areas that fall under the Wildlife Department all suffer as a result.
Tourism in Yala is a mess. It is out of control. There is no master plan being followed, and even if a master plan was originally written, it's gathering dust in the Department of Wildlife Conservation offices.
It has come to the point where it is endangering animals living in this park, and the constant problem of speeding, responding to phone calls or messages about sightings makes these drivers speed recklessly across a park that they should drive carefully through. The first leopard found was at a place called Kotadandigal. It was in the water and crocs were eating it. It was only the upper body of the leopard. They did a post-mortem and found that it had died of some other causes, not crocodiles, but crocodiles were feeding on something that had died due to an impact.
If the jeep drivers are so leopard-centric that they drive like maniacs to a leopard sighting, show the leopard, and then feel their job is done without any interpretation of the park and the wealth of the park, the natural history of the park, then you're selling second best.
The people who knocked those 4 leopards down would not have done it on purpose, right? It was just because they didn't follow the rules. And now those are easier rules to control, because presumably, or rather theoretically, there should have been an officer from the wildlife department in those vehicles. What were they doing? Were they not trying to enforce those rules while they were being broken? If people engage in excessive speeding or something like that, then it's up to the employee of the wildlife department to stop the driver from acting like that.
Like the Wild West, massive traffic jams, people shouting at each other, slamming doors, absolutely atrocious behavior. Let's get along. People might say if the speeding is controlled, then the problem is solved. Or if the telephone towers are down and there is no mobile phone communication within the park, then the problem is solved. But that is only one aspect of what degrades this park or endangers the wildlife in this park.
What are the immediate problems that we have? We have poaching, we have ill discipline in the parks, right? If you look at that law, a lot of things that are prohibited are contained in schedules. So the layman doesn't know the law he's breaking.
In Sri Lanka, poaching can mean killing wildlife wherever they live, not just within protected areas, national parks, sanctuaries, etc. One that is probably practiced most ubiquitously is using wire snares and trap lines. And these snares snare anything that passes through them.
We have 5 blocks in Yala, don't forget, which is well over 500 square miles. It's also a fallacy that those blocks are protected by people not visiting. All the illegal stuff, gemming, mining, poaching, logging, all that stuff takes place.
Again, it was the 4th leopard killed inside, but not due to poaching. It was due to ill discipline. And that, I think, is a low-hanging fruit.
There are quite simply too many vehicles entering the park. And the need for those vehicles is sustained by the number of beds, the number of hotel rooms that are established on the edge of the park.
I think everybody is taking advantage of the current situation and the current state of the laws, or rather the enforcement of the laws, right? They're all gaining by. I mean, we talk about corporates, right? The corporates, they gain by getting more and more customers, right? Of course, they will say, we don't know what our employees are doing down on ground. But then they have a duty to create awareness. They know that the problem exists, and they have a duty to invest in trying to deal with that issue.
Wildlife tour operators and hotels that have operations in the near neighborhood of Yala, they all contribute to the overcrowding, they all contribute to the indiscipline in the park. The current model of ecotourism, I would say, is not ecotourism at all, because ecotourism is something that is sensitive to the effects of that tourism on the environment that those tourists visit. What is called ecotourism in Sri Lanka is just some greenwashing.
Greenwashing is building something in concrete, planting a couple of trees, painting the building green, and calling it ecotourism.
The greenwashing they do serves to kind of alleviate their conscience, and they can put it out in their annual report, and they can talk about it at genteel gatherings of fellow corporate worthies, but at the end of the day, it's not working. It's not happening on the ground. And if they have genuine ecotourists coming for the wildlife experience that they offer, their greenwashed ecotourism will not wash.
So it is illogical for the big boys, the travel companies, the hotel companies, to continue to develop properties on the edge of a park. And it doesn't matter whether it's Yala or any other park, if the number of rooms exceeds the carrying capacity of the place. It doesn't matter how environmentally friendly or responsible that resort might be, that building might be. Using different forms of insulation, using solar power, using low energy light bulbs is responsible. but you still have a huge impact on the park by bringing more and more people, and that is unregulated, and that is irresponsible.
You know, that's what our corporates need to understand. They can't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. You know, they've got to look after it, they've got to, nurture it, make it grow, make it better, and that's not what's happening. It's short-term gain, very short-sighted, profiteering in my view.
We are allowing this park to be violated and the wild animals in this park to be killed because of our inaction, our inability, or our inefficiency, or our corruption. Then we are perverting the very purpose for which this park was primarily declared a protected area.
That's why you need to study this problem carefully and come out with a plan which will address all these issues. You can't be putting little corks on every little leak that springs up. You have to relook at the whole thing and come out with a new system of laws that's workable.
Decisions have to be made by people at all levels. The most obvious department is the Department of Wildlife Conservation. And that department has to be empowered, it has to be led, it has to be dynamic, it has to use its imagination, and has to realize that it has a problem.
I think nothing short of the President, Prime Minister getting involved and taking action and coming up with a master plan with all stakeholders involved.
The President and the Prime Minister can take some hard decisions, but informed decisions, to change the way wildlife tourism is done in this country and happens here.
We have a law, right? And it might not be the perfect law. You'll never find a perfect law. But in my opinion, it can work. It's broad enough to be made to be workable.
My personal view is all of the entire tourism industry should change gears in this country. We should be catering to a different type of tourist, a tourist who is more sensitive to the country that they visit.
So we have to move fast, the government has to move fast, the travel trade have to listen to the concerns of conservationists, and if we can't self-regulate, someone has to impose some rules.
Sustainable, responsible tourism can certainly help conservation and also kind of give back to the economy.
How is it that we are so callous? How is it that we allow corruption and narrow self-interest to destroy it?
Yala's too valuable to be abused like that, or to be reduced to yet an afternoon stop on someone's tour.
We need to start from the very beginning. A kid entering year 1 in school must be taught that there are certain standards, right? Or certain rules that they must follow. Again, not for anybody else, for their own benefit. They must be taught to understand that these things are disappearing.
Yala needs to be enjoyed. In a sense, Yala should be worshipped and treated for what she is. Treat her well and the Yala will look after you.
Unless you take care of it, unless you nurture it, it's not going to be around for them when they're older.
What you have is unique, and when you've lost it, it's gone.
At this juncture, we can decide and make positive changes and lasting changes that will keep Sri Lanka beautiful, unique, diverse, and almost inexplicably so.